John?
Yeah?
John?
What's that, George?
Have you got a cigarette for me, please?
I think I've got one here for you, George. It's Marlboro.
I've just got a packet.
With a micro-knee finger.
Marlboro with a micro-knee finger?
No,
Why? Thank you very much, John.
It's a big cigarette
I will-
for a big man.
I will light it now. We are smoking our
Marlboro,
with
George
a
and John.
the
Buddies and
pals.
The 1960s was altogether a very different time, one in which smoking was not only socially acceptable, but to be positively encouraged. All four Beatles were prodigious smokers and can be seen eagerly puffing their way through interviews and press conferences, with George once even using John as a human ashtray.
So if we shake our heads, it's the equivalent of scoring a goal, and that's when the screams are loudest. Do you see what I mean?
So it comes as no surprise that the Beatles would turn to tobacco as inspiration for the title of their final album.
You're making an album, and towards the end of the album you start thinking, well, we need a title for this. So you're looking around, you're fishing around, and the engineer, Jeff Emmerich, who is our Beatle engineer who did all the great sounds for us, was smoking cigarettes called Everest. They're like a kind of menthol cigarette at the time. And we kind of looked at that and said, Everest. It's kind of, it's big, it's heroic. That could be good for the album.
Imagine an alternate universe where instead of fans making their pilgrimage to cross Abbey Road, instead they made their way to the somewhat less accessible foothills of Mount Everest. Engineer John Kurlander remembers it was around July, when it was very hot outside, that someone mentioned the possibility of the four of them taking a private plane over to the foothills of Mount Everest to shoot the cover photograph. But as they became more enthusiastic to finish the LP, someone, I don't remember whom, suggested, look, I can't be bothered to schlep all the way over to the Himalayas for a cover. Why don't we just go outside, take the photo there, call the LP Abbey Road, and have done with it? That's my memory of why it became Abbey Road, because they couldn't be bothered to go to Tibet and get cold. Ringo recalls going through weeks of everyone saying, why don't we call it Billy's Left Boot, and things like that. And then Paul said, why don't we just call it Abbey Road? Apparently other titles under consideration included All Good Children Go to Heaven,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All good children go to heaven.
and Four in the Bar.
And just one day we were in Abbey Road working, and I just sort of said, well, look, why not Abbey Road? Because if we did that, we could just run outside.
Right.
There's a level crossing, as we call it out there, zebra crossing. And we could just stand there, we could get photographed, come back to work. It'd take 2 seconds.
Right.
I said, and it's not a bad title, Abbey Road. To us, it was kind of just the name of a studio. But I thought if you take it out of context, it kind of sounds like Monastery Lane, Abbey Road.
Sadly, years of heavy smoking most likely precipitated George's cancer and also impacted on Paul. Whilst recording Band on the Run in Nigeria, Paul had even collapsed and was rushed to hospital, where a bronchial spasm caused by too much smoking was diagnosed. Regardless of the expedience of doing the photo shoot just outside the EMI studios in Abbey Road, it was unlikely that the Beatles were ever going to lend the title of what would be their swan song album to the commercial endorsement of a cigarette brand, no matter how obscurely hidden.
Isn't it weird how just a simple thought like that becomes a legend? I mean, that's like iconic now, Abbey Road.
Yeah.
And yet it could have been called Everest. And that would have required the Beatles to fly to Mount Everest and do a whole photo shoot. So in a way, it was sort of a lazy approach.
It was a cheap approach.
It was a cheap approach.